Okay, at 8:35, we're going to convene the Mendocino County Employees Retirement Association Board of Directors meeting into session. And I guess, Judy, could you conduct the roll call?
Okay. Ms. Shatmeyer?
Here.
Ms. Forrester, Cavness, and Mr. Anderson are all absent by prior arrangement this morning. Mr. Jurdy?
Present.
Ms. Smith?
Yes, I'm here.
Mr. Cromer?
I'm present.
Mr. Shoemaker?
Right here.
Ms. Harris?
Present.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you for being present today.
Jerry, it looks like you're in the Retirement Association conference room. Could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I'd be delighted. Ready? Begin. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. All right, so next on our agenda is public comment on non-agenda items, and we have ways for people to submit written comments and through the agenda and through the website. And so now would be a time for members of the public to comment up to 3 minutes each. So do we have any members of the public who wish to address the board on items not on today's agenda?
No public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you. All right, well then next our agenda is, it's listed as an announcement regarding the appointment of an audit committee. And Doris, I think we surveyed the members who were interested in the audit committee. Who were the volunteers?
To appoint the chair, and per discussions, we're going to just make the announcement that Trustee Cavness is the chair of the audit committee.
Okay, yeah. So Trustee Cavness is the chair of the audit committee. All right, now we're on to consent calendar. We have the minutes of June 16th. We have the June 2021 retirement report, preliminary monthly financial report, and the quarterly trustee education and training report. Are there any items on the consent calendar that people would like to discuss separately, or shall we just approve the consent calendar? Okay. Well, then by acclamation, we will approve the consent calendar of no objections. Okay, then we have discussion and possible action regarding adoption of resolution 2021-05, conforming voluntary compliance program implementation to the Internal Revenue Service compliance statement.
Thank you, Chair Jurdy. This is a resolution to update the one the board adopted in November of last year regarding the correction project. This includes the entire IRS compliance statement for errors that are being corrected, and has some additional counts, including the addition of 2 errors that were not in the original submission, which was the Alameda court decision corrections and a correction to post interest to some accounts that missed semi-annual interest posting while in an inactive status. If you have any questions regarding the resolution or the compliance statement, I'm happy to address any questions you may have.
Excuse me if I may, through the chair. Doris, did you want to speak to a couple of the other issues, in particular the one about the IRS requiring the full reimbursement of payments beyond
Sure.
the 3 years?
So in the initial submission, the IRS came back with some directed changes. One of the changes that the IRS was requiring is that the system make full correction to any members who were underpaid as opposed to applying the 3-year statute of limitations that's in California's Code of Civil Procedures. So we will be correcting individuals who have already received retroactive benefit payments to correct it back to the date of retirement. Additionally, on one of our errors, we had asked for a prospective correction only. The IRS did want us to go back and provide an opportunity to some members who were not noticed of all of the different available options under the plan. The IRS did accept our proposal not to collect any overpaid benefits back from the retiree, and that we can have those treated as part of the actuarial unfunded accrued liability. And I think that was the majority of the changes, was it not?
And for those watching our meeting, Doris, you have a memo in the packet that it explains the changes.
There is
do we
a
have
memo in the packet with the full IRS compliance statement behind it that goes into much more detail.
Yeah. Do we have any board member questions or comments? Director Smith?
Yes, just a comment. It was very helpful to read that entire IRS report, compliance report. It gave a lot of information that I know I read, but it's been months ago. It was also interesting to me that on some of these, the logical, like even on failure number 1 about leave without pay excluded, it was interesting that we had both positive and negative adjustments to that number. And it's logical that it would all be, underpayment and there wouldn't be overpayment. So I just found that interesting to read. I really appreciate the information.
Any other director comments or questions?
This is Sherry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, and so I will be abstaining from this item. I recuse myself from all closed session items, but this is not closed session, but I will abstain myself from any votes on this item.
Okay, thank you. Director Shoemaker?
Sure. I was glad to see the IRS comments on this, and just curious. So they have done their full examination of all of our suggested corrections. There are no remaining comments to be had from the IRS at this point.
That's correct. They've issued the compliance statement agreeing with the correction plan as in the attachment to the, as part of this resolution. There is nothing outstanding other than to finish the correction.
So if we were to make a determination, we wanted to modify this under our own volition, that would reopen the whole project with the IRS?
I would have to defer to tax counsel on that, and they're not on this call, but I would suspect that yes, that would require that we refile from the beginning.
I would, if I may, through the chair, yes, it would do that and more. I mean, I think it would be inconsistent with what the IRS has directed, and I'd almost put a negative connotation to that.
Right. So any change that we might consider would be a problem for the association.
It would be inconsistent with what the IRS has basically
Approved.
directed us or approved.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Cromer?
Thank you, Chair. In the letter that the IRS wrote to our executive director, there was a reference in the future that they may ask us as an agency to verify that we've corrected the failures and modified the procedures as described in the compliance statement. I believe somewhere along the line there was a timeline that they had issued or said that these need to be done by. Is that still in effect, or do we know if we've received an extension or will ask for an extension later on?
I do expect that we will ask for an extension. The compliance statement triggers a 150-day period to make all of the corrections required under the plan. Due to staff size and volume, I would expect that we will likely require an extension of the 150 days. Tax Council seems supportive of that, but they did want to wait a little bit so we could show significant progress, and I do have some progress to update the board on. I think part of it might have been in one of the memos, but we are moving forward to make those corrections that we can as quickly as possible. I did mention in the board memo that all of the non-retired corrections associated with the Alameda project, they were noticed in July, and the correction will, as far as the refund of contributions paid on the excluded pay types, will occur at the end of August. So there's 173 corrections going out that were included in the report total on the next item. So there have been a lot of work done behind the scenes to prepare for some of the IRS directed changes that require us to contact a large number of retirees.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, just looking at the retirement board meeting, do we, in the chambers, do we have any questions or comments? Okay, do we, Judy, do we have any questions or comments from members of the public?
Yes, I have one. Terry Gross.
Good morning. My comment is to request that the board remember that the IRS is an administrative agency, and its area of concern can be characterized as narrow, although it's very important to the retirement system, and it has to do with the tax exempt status. However, modifying any of the failures in response to legal action would certainly require a different analysis by the IRS. So I guess I just wanted to counter a bit the conversation that seemed to be going in the direction that this board had no discretion whatsoever to make any changes in its conclusions, because if there is legal action regarding the modifications, I'm sure the IRS will take that into consideration.
Okay, thank you. Judy, do we have any other questions or comments from the public? All right.
Terry, your hand is raised again. Are you through?
I am finished, thank you.
Thank you. No other public comment at this time.
Oh, Director Shoemaker.
So with Terry Gross's comments considered, have we sought any discussion with the IRS after continual discussion with retirees and this board, further discussion on a very limited scope with the IRS about any particular set of corrections? Has that occurred? Had that discussion with legal counsel occurred?
I don't know if that's a question for me, but I'm not quite sure I understand it. I mean, there have been communications and discussions between tax counsel and the IRS, which has led to their approval letter, if you will, and the amended resolution that's before the board today.
Well, I guess I think there's a category of people waiting for answers on corrections that have some very interesting issues, and that for me, they've been very active in communicating, and I understand somewhat active in communicating with our staff. So the question is, have those communications been taken to tax counsel about the possibility of other modifications? I'm going to guess the answer is no, to answer my own question.
Well, we have had some conversations with tax counsel as far as what would happen if there was action or even a court decision that essentially modified what the compliance statement, the correction that was agreed to ends up being modified by, let's say, a court order. They said that that would be then up to the IRS to review, but that it wouldn't be given in a certainty that the IRS would retain our tax qualified status based on changes that occurred through either negotiation or court action. I think that was.
So Doris, we're starting to trend into territory that's an attorney-client communication. But I allow it because I appreciate that that we have members of the public and members who are interested in it. I'll leave it that if we had an inconsistent court decision with what the IRS has directed us to do, it could create a significant complication for the system, and frankly, we'd have to analyze how to proceed. And I think that's about as far as we can go with that conversation, because we are getting into attorney-client communications here.
Thank you.
Well, and just in taking a step back, I mean, this compliance document with the IRS does retain the tax exempt status of the retirement system, which is beneficial for all of the members of the retirement system as well as the plan sponsors, that the investment returns are tax-free. So it would be pretty catastrophic if we lost that tax exempt status. Director Shoemaker?
Yeah, I agree with that statement. And I just want to make the positive comment that I am glad that the IRS has made its determinations, because I think we did overreach to some degree in regard to some of these corrections. And it's glad to know that they definitely will allow us to take care of everybody that was shorted.
Okay, any other questions or comments, or would someone like to make a motion to approve the resolution? Director Smith?
I will approve adoption of resolution 2021-05 as presented.
Second.
I move to approve. That's what I meant.
You mean you're making a motion to approve it?
Yes, I did. After I said it, I said I will make a motion. Yet.
Judy, did you hear Jerry's second?
No. So Jerry's the second.
Second.
Thank you.
Okay, can we have a roll call?
Okay. Mr. Jurdy?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Cromer?
Aye.
Mr. Shoemaker?
Aye.
Ms. Harris?
Aye.
Approved.
Okay, thank you. That takes us to item.
Question, we're in a position right now that we need unanimous votes to pass anything, is that correct? With the quorum?
I believe there are 6 trustees. Sherry is here. Well, on that item, we only have 5, but Sherry is here, so we do have 6.
Okay, thank you.
And to be honest with you, I'd have to review the bylaws to see if it's a majority of the quorum. Let's hope we don't get to that issue, but if we do need to, I'll review the bylaws.
Right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So that takes us to item number 5, which is review of the historical benefit review project.
Thank
Doris?
you, Chair Judy. Included in your board packets is a summary of activity for the current month on the correction project. This has been updated to add the additional errors that were added to the correction plan and counts associated with changes as directed by the Internal Revenue Service. It also includes the or reflects the active deferred members who are receiving the refund of contributions on Alameda and the other additions to the plan. So if you have any questions regarding the report, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I don't have any questions, but I do want to just say a thank you to the staff at MSERA, the very small staff at MSERA for the work on this project and to, the way it lays out the different cases. Obviously, no names are given. I think it's helpful to see the context as the project and the review is underway. Director Shoemaker.
It's muted.
Director Shoemaker, I think you're muted.
You can't permanently mute me, that's for sure. So the question was asking Doris to kind of give us a review of where we are on our schedule, what our target date is at this point, and as we move along.
Certainly. The 150 days to complete corrections that comes with the issuance of the compliance statement, that clock started running July 1, and we would have essentially till November, because it's a 5-month 150-day window. With that, you'll notice that the number of accounts needing correction went up significantly. That was due to the addition of a couple of errors that were not in the totals prior, and then also the change for error number 3 regarding retirees who had not been provided all of the different option allowances at retirement. So one of the significant additions to the plan was the correction of interest on inactive accounts going back to 2003. Those are in the process of being calculated now. That's 700, I think, and 43 accounts that are being corrected. Those calculations are being done and will be done probably in late October for having our vendors script those corrections to member accounts. So that will take off a significant number. And then later this month, we will be sending notice to approximately 385 individuals who are retired regarding options 3 and 4. The numbers initially included here was 743 or something like that, I think, but upon further review, we found some of those folks did not qualify to be noticed because they had a qualifying beneficiary for the option selected. So we will be making a large notice later on towards the end of this month or first part of next month in anticipation of trying to get as much work done on the new additions before the 150-day marker is anywhere close to being completed.
Okay, thank you. And I do have one question, another question. And this is, again, there's a particular group of individuals on these lists that have had significant questions, and I was wondering if you could kind of and these are the folks that bought time, service time, and they're now finding that purchase of service time wasn't authorized by the Board of Supervisors. And the formula that we're using in the corrections, and I guess I'll try to say it, and you certainly can correct me or just straight up give it, is that their process is looked at. They are looked at what they quote are overpaid. Then they have a amount of money on deposit with us that will be refunded. But before it's refunded, it is reduced by the amount of overpayment. But, and then an additional piece of that is that money that was on deposit that is being refunded will be refunded with interest. And what was the interest rate in that calculation?
So before I allow Doris to answer, if I may, through the chair, I'm just starting to get a little bit concerned that we may be straying from this agenda topic, which is just an overview of big picture update of where we are with the correction project. And this sounds like it's really delving into a particular correction and how it's done. And so I think if Doris, if you can answer that very quickly and briefly, we can do that and move on. But that almost sounds like maybe it's more of a separate topic to me.
I certainly am happy to bring back something at next month's meeting with detail and provide written materials for the board packet if that would be preferable. Jeff, I am prepared to provide a verbal answer, but it gets into the details because of the nature of Trustee Shoemaker's question.
A written response would be fine at the next meeting.
Written response to the next meeting. Okay, I will include that on the next agenda and we can review the methodology for those corrections. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from directors or comments? Judy, do we have any questions or comments from members of the public?
Yes, we do have one public comment.
Are you ready for me?
Yes, go ahead, Terry.
First, I want to comment on the decision that was just made. You have members of the public here who are attending one meeting a month in order to hear what is going on related to their benefits. And I'm going to comment that your council is being unduly restrictive regarding this meeting. And as a member of the public, I am going to also ask the same questions that Richard Shoemaker asked. It's unbelievable to me that you would limit the topic the way that you have. But really, I'm here this morning because I wanted to talk a bit about one of the issues that Richard raises, which is this idea about this group of retirees that have been characterized as being overpaid that actually purchased their benefits. And I fail to understand why that characterization has not been used. Retirees who purchased their benefits. These are not retirees that are overpaid. These are retirees that took money out of their savings, their IRAs, their 401ks to purchase benefits. And I'm going to speculate that there's not one person on this board who, if they had put down money for an annuity in the private sector and based their future economic decisions when they were retiring, what jobs they took, and then were told that the annuity was invalid would not be feeling like they had been seriously damaged. So I would like this board to change the narrative a bit, that these are not individuals who are overpaid, that they purchase their benefits based on being encouraged to do so by your staff and your administrators, and gross lack of oversight. Because if you look, and when you do delve into these purchased benefits, you will see, as I have, that these are not overly complex mathematical or legal issues. These were very simple issues: misrepresentations, breaches of fiduciary duty that could have been easily corrected if you had some oversight, if your staff had been regularly trained and refreshed. So again, I would like to change the narrative a bit here from people who were overpaid, retirees who are overpaid, to retirees who purchase their benefits. That was one issue. The other one is I am concerned a bit that one of the administrators during the relevant time period, when probably hundreds of these failures were made, is now sitting on this board with you. And I do have a concern about that. I have not delved into it. I would ask you to take a look at it, because administrators are responsible for oversight. And again, I want to change the narrative a bit here from talking about people who were overpaid to talking about people who took their own personal funds based on the encouragement of your staff and your administrators to purchase benefits that they are now, maybe a number of years down the line, finding out are invalid. And frankly, I don't know that you can compensate people adequately based on your current plan to do so. So I thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Director Shoemaker.
And I think the last question I might have on this is, I believe these guys have a group number, and I think it's 3. I was wondering when the final corrections for these folks might be forwarded to them.
Are you referring to purchase issues, Director Shoemaker?
Yes.
There are 3 or 4, maybe even 5 different errors that relate to some type of purchase issue. And we are starting to work on addressing those. I cannot give you a date, and they will not all be noticed at the same time.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Do we have any other members of the public wishing to comment on this agenda item?
There's no other public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you, Judy. Well, thank you for the update for this meeting, and it sounds like the director will have a specific agenda, or at least a specific report available for the next meeting. Mr. Burke?
So I did want to report, I did take a look at the bylaws, and it is a majority of the quorum. So if we do have a split vote, that would be how it would be decided.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. All right, well, that takes us to agenda item number 6, which is investment matter, and we have our monthly investment report.
Thank you, Chair Jurdy. The investment report for June 30 is provided in your packet. Actually, was this for June or May? June, okay. You'll notice that we had very good returns for the fiscal year. Total returns were about 31%. And we have experienced some market volatility here during the month of July. There was a bit of a sell-off on Monday of this week if you were paying attention. There was a significant rebound yesterday, and I believe Robert has some additional comments regarding the investment portfolio. So Robert, I'll turn it to you.
Yeah, hi board, welcome. Let me give a super brief update here. The fiscal year 21 ended on a definitively positive note, just like Doris mentioned. Preliminarily, the investment portfolio returned 31.71% compared to a 21.7% return for the benchmark. We outperformed the benchmark by at least 4.6%. That does not include the infrastructure.
Could Robert move toward the mic or something? I'm having trouble hearing.
Yeah, sorry. Maybe I'll yell up here. Is that all right?
That's fine.
Yeah. So all of this happened within the context of major upheaval in traditional U.S. lifestyle brought on by the COVID lockdown. Unfortunately, starting around December of last year, COVID death counts began increasing appreciably in the U.S. From March 2020 through November 30, 2020, there were a little over 273,000 deaths in the U.S. By the end of February 2021, this number had almost doubled to approximately a little over 516,000. This is a 90% increase in reported death counts over 90 days. Most of the increase can be found in the middle of the country, with the highest community transmission rates found in Nevada, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, Louisiana, Alabama, and Florida. However, those death counts appear to have significantly flattened out. The graph now looks like a logarithmic function. So people are aware that those functions can increase dramatically, but then they quickly taper off. But clearly, what's going to happen in the future, we don't know that yet. But there is some hope that these numbers are decreasing at a significant rate. Typical of the upheaval during the last 18 months, predictably, unemployment in the U.S. spiked to the highest rate in the last 40 years. April 2020 unemployment for the St. Louis Fed calculated at 12.3%. The U.S. economy has since fallen. The U.S. unemployment has since fallen by June 2021 to 4.3%. The second highest unemployment rate calculated in the last 40 years was in March of 2010 at 8.5%. So that just kind of gives you a little bit of perspective on the recent activity. All the previous recoveries also took multiple years. Though the unemployment rate is not as low as it was before the pandemic, the rate is nearing 2% higher than before the lockdown. I view that as a good sign. The employment market has gained back 78% of the April 2020 unemployment increase. The Western CPI rate, the rate that we use to calculate the retiree COLA increases for June of this year, was 4.22%. This is slightly below the headline rolling 12-month CPI of 5.1%. Due to the lockdown starting last year, as the speed of money was drastically reduced because folks couldn't buy things, the Western region experienced a bout of deflation from March through May, an increase in inflation from June to August, and finally relative stability from September to December. The calendar year CPI began to significantly diverge, increasing at a faster rate from prior years, specifically the prior 5 years, starting in April. If states increase lockdown measures due to the spread of the Delta variant, this should increase the downward pressure on CPI. Nevada, Washington, Arizona, and New Mexico are in the Western region and are all experiencing Delta variant outbreaks. In terms of the domestic outlook for the first half of the year, investment returns from January 1st through June 30 have been very good. Small cap equity over this period has returned 17.5%. Small cap values returned 26.68%. Small growth has returned 8.9%. Our mid cap equity are returning around 18.5%. These are all indexes, I'm sorry. The large cap equity has returned 15.25%. Large values returned 17.25%, and large growth has returned 12.98%, almost 13% for just this half of the year. By comparison, one of the managers that we ended up moving away from last year, Harbor Cap, has a YTD return this year for comparison of 9.73%. We're all well aware that it's very hard for active managers to beat the S&P 500, and it does appear that that's exactly what happened with our large cap managers. So Cal will give us a little more insight on that next month when they do the quarterly update. But I just wanted to mention that because it does appear to have been a good move for us. And I must admit that I was skeptical at the time. Fixed income for the first half of the year, Treasury yields have dropped. Early last March, the 10-year Treasury, which is thought of as a proxy for U.S. mortgage rates, had dropped significantly. Then it slowly crept back up to a high around April of this year, at which these rates began dropping again as investors looked for the relative safety and stability of treasuries. This is actually what happened on Monday, basically. The same exact kind of thing happened. It just happened instead of over months. So the board is well aware by those reports that basically since November, December of last year up through April, this time period that I'm referencing, we had to continually readjust into bonds. We had to continually shift money over so that we could maintain our allocation. Since April, these rates have dropped approximately 27%, and that's through Monday. So that's helped us a little bit. The Bloomberg Ags has actually returned a negative 1.6%. That's also on you'll see that on the report. You can see a smaller time frame on our bond allocation on the report that you have in front of you. The dollar itself has actually appreciated in value this year, 3.47% increase versus the major world currency. Just for reference, today's dollar exchange rate is close to where it was in November of last year when the reflation trade really started to move. International equities are significantly behind where the U.S. is. For the first half of the year, the MSCI ACWI EX US returned 9.16%. MSCI EFI, another benchmark we use, 8.32%. Our emerging markets, MSCI, returned for this first half of the year, 7.45%. Those numbers are significantly lower than our domestic returns. Finally, in closing, it does look like this is going to be the highest return since 2011. In 2011, we had a 21.68% return. There's been a few other years where we've had high returns that are maybe around 17 or 18%. But this year has significantly surpassed those prior year highs. So all in all, we've had a good year. We've maintained our asset allocation target ranges. The plan is to continue to do that into the future. Luckily, we have a very clear investment policy statement that makes that relatively straightforward. It doesn't really matter what happens any given day with the references that Doris was talking about. Certainly, we're watching that, paying attention, but the ISP allows us to basically make moves and changes without much worry or thought. So overall, we've had a great year, and the hope is that it will continue at least for a little while. Everybody's certainly nervous because we're at all-time highs, but you got to be at an all-time high at some point. So here we are now. And that's all I have to say for the investment. Callan will be here next month to go a little more in depth than I did. You know, any other questions you may have, I can attempt to answer.
Thank you, Robert. I'm just looking at the last page of the report where it shows the at the bottom of the last column shows the 10-year returns being 9.2% for the fund. Of course, this is post the 2008 recession, 2011 through 2021, but still 9.2% returns. The target for the benchmark would have been 9.26, so very, very close to the benchmark of what the plan had hoped to achieve, or what those same type of investments would have achieved and well above our target. So in those 10 years, so that's at least a 10-year spread is pretty good. It might be nice to see in that report a 15-year, which would be prior to the.
Yeah, we will have that. One thing to consider on that column, the 120 column there, that does include 2 of our biggest return years. So that's really capturing a lot of our recent growth. It will be interesting to see the 15-year. That will be in the next report. That we should be doing next month.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions or comments for Robert? Any members of the public wishing to comment on this item?
Gary had a comment.
Oh, go ahead.
A comment that I made to Robert just before the meeting began, but I've been on this board for maybe 6+ years and seen that value of our portfolio go from the 300 million now to approaching 700 million. And that's incredible growth, even though we are taking money out regularly to pay benefits. So, one of these, I don't even want to say it. I was going to talk about the future. I'm afraid I might jinx it if I did, but it's been gratifying to see how well Callan has managed our money and how well this board has voted for tweaks and changes and whatever to make it more diversified and less risky. We still have a lot of work to do, but well done. Well done to Callan, well done to us.
Okay, any other questions or comments from board members or from members of the public?
I see no public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you, Judy. Okay, well, thank you for the report. And let's see, that should take us to, let's see, it should take us to item, I'm sorry, I'm working off of a laptop. That should take us to item, I think, number 7, discussion possible action regarding strategic plan and mission statement.
Thank you, Chair Jordy, members of the board. Many of the board weren't even on the board last time a full comprehensive strategic plan was done, which was back in 2017. Last year, due to the pandemic and Zoom meetings, it was kind of postponed, and of course, the pandemic lasted longer than I think many of us expected. So this is to get some board feedback on how they would like to proceed with the strategic planning process. Just because so many of the current trustees weren't part of the last full planning process, I would recommend doing a in-person offsite special meeting, and we can talk about some options for that. If due to concerns with the continued pandemic and when things may, whether things continue to improve or backslide, I did outline an option for performing the strategic plan over the number of months as part of the regularly scheduled board meetings. I would like some board input on how they would like to proceed so we can get something scheduled.
Okay, thank you, Doris. Comments or questions from board members?
Is there a time?
I'd like to speak in favor of Doris's recommendation regarding an offsite and focused strategic planning. I was on another board and we used to do it annually. Changes in membership on the board, changes in society, changes in our whole lives with something like reacting to COVID. And if COVID is a problem, certainly with the Delta variant lurking out there, I think that if we did an offsite, it should be fluid enough that if all of us are immunized, and I would hope that's the case, that we can do so without too much risk. But I think we need to know what people are thinking, how they're looking at the future, and what we need to do to continue to be this very strategic and policy focused board that we have become. It's some really remarkable progress, I think.
Thank you, Jerry. And I agree. I think it should be in person if at all possible, and I think it is possible. And also the fact that Doris, as our executive director, was not a part of the last strategic plan, and I'm sure she has suggestions, ideas that would help the organization and the board, so that it could be timely. Any other questions or comments?
Timing, I would suggest late September, early October.
Director Shoemaker, I think that personally works for me. I just want us to think about, in my mind, we're kind of living in an era of fire seasons at that time of year. And I mean, I hope that's not the case this year, but I do have some concerns about that being the case. And so I just want us to think about that. So maybe we'd have to be flexible in rescheduling it if we were to have a major fire and air quality issues, because I could have envisioned this as probably being outdoors, but I'm not sure. Director Cromer?
Number one, I would like to agree with, I think, everybody that's spoken so far, that I think the in-person would be very, very beneficial, especially to some of the newer trustees, myself included. And I did not get to participate in the last one, so I very much look forward to participating in this one. I think as far as my schedule, I know we all have our own personal schedules, but it would be easier for me to do one, whatever session we do off site, and be completely dedicated to that instead of trying to piecemeal it together into multiple meetings. And I completely agree with you, Chair Jurdy, that September, October, if we personally plan on those emergencies happening until they don't, because if we don't act that way, then we're not ready. So it would be very problematic if we do have a major emergency going on that I likely would not be able to attend if there's an emergency operations center deployment or anything else.
So Director Cromer, just to clarify, so I think if we were to schedule it during that time period, I think we'd have to be prepared for alternate dates, is I guess what I'm thinking.
I agree with your statement, Chair, and I do want to do it sooner than later. And I agree, to have an aggressive timeline. I just want everybody to be prepared that, there is the potential for that always. We've all lived here for quite some time, I think, and we all understand that. But if we have plan B or C included in our plan, then I would feel more comfortable with that.
This is Sherry. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. What about, can we have like maybe one of those Google polls go out with dates? Personally, for me, October is kind of a difficult month. I have a lot of family things going on that month. But maybe if we could do that Google thing and so we can get the absolute most participation that we can get.
Yes, we can work with a scheduling survey thing where you can indicate dates that work for you, and we can compile those to see the dates that work for the majority of the parties. Is that what you're referring to, Sherry?
Yeah, thank you. And sorry, I don't know if that was said or not. I'm kind of having a little bit of difficulty hearing sometimes. So yeah, that's exactly it. Thank you, Doris.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Smith?
I'm sorry, what
Have
did
to
you
unmute.
say?
Yes, I would like to agree with Quincy as far as, and everybody else, about having an in-person meeting dedicated to this rather than parsing it out over several meetings. And I would like to see some sort of retreat, whether it's a day long or overnight or whatever. And like Sherry, October might be problematic for me, but if we do a Google search and see which ones work for everybody, that'd be great.
Okay, I'm sorry, Quincy, did you have additional comment?
Yeah, just one last, it seems to be in agreement with everything, but the potential for some educational materials during that retreat is also very beneficial to me. And I think all of the trustees to get additional education hours.
Thank you for that feedback, because that was one of the questions in the cover memo. So I think we can certainly try to work in an educational component, and then also look at the strategic plan and address whether it's a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year framework that we want to build on. Additionally, with next month, hopefully we can come back with the survey results for availability and also some suggested locations, and get a decision in the September meeting on finalizing those types of decisions so we can get it scheduled in the calendar. I'll work with Judy on that, and I look forward to an opportunity to meet you all in person. I've met only a couple of you, and I've been here for like 14, 15 months now. So it was nice to meet Jerry finally. I've met Richard, so I'm looking forward to an opportunity to meet all of you in person and work with you on defining the priorities as we move forward out of the correction project.
Okay, just for clarification, Doris, do you feel that you have enough feedback?
Unless the board would like to provide some feedback right now on whether you would like one full day or a 2 day or 2 half days. I've seen it done different ways in different places. If you have preferences on that for scheduling, 1 day might be easier than a 2 day, especially given all the activity that goes on, fire activity, tax time, etc. But if you have some preference on what you think an appropriate duration for the meeting would be, whether it's 1 full day or some set of 2 day, that would be helpful in us looking at sites that might be available.
I think that's appropriate feedback, because that would affect the doodle poll that you'd be looking at, whether it's 1 day or 2 days. So could people chime in on whether or not they'd rather have a full day or spread over 2 days?
Eric, I would personally, with how spread out our trustees are throughout the entire county, I would lean towards a 1 full day, and that limits the travel and other maybe negative impacts on our regular work schedule. So it's my opinion.
Vice Chair Smith?
Well, I would have an issue, well, either way, there's benefits. And I would say that the benefits of having a 2 day or 1.5 day with an overnight gives you the chance to think about the things that were put out the first day and to come to a final conclusion on the second day about what you want in your plan. But I know that's also could be cost prohibitive, and probably for those of you who aren't retired might be difficult to do. So, I'm good either way. I could go for a long 1 day, or have the opportunity to spend an evening thinking about things and discussing informally some things so that we could finalize it on the next day. Either way, I'm good.
I'd like to suggest the benefit of that 2-day program in regard to the group being together and not being in the work mode. And, having some, I would call it social time, for lack of a better term, or downtime, and I agree with the concepts of thinking about it. Being able to think about what came up in the first day. And I've been at some 2-day events, and they could be like a 3/4 day and a half day or something like that to allow for travel and not being burnt out by the time you got somewhere. And there's been some assignments over that night that you would go back to your room and do something about what you talked about that day. That's not to say a full day's work and in and out would not work well, but I like the broken up concept.
Okay. Jerry?
I vote for the day and a half. Gives us some time to socialize. Because we go home, we do our homework, we come back once a month or via Zoom, try to put our heads together over things, and we really don't have an opportunity to talk them through. And I just harken back to the retreat that was done when James came on, and the changes in this board based on that retreat. It was truly remarkable, and we continue to carry through that high level, I believe, policy decisions, even things that are difficult to do to continue to promote the integrity of the system. So, I mean, if we can't do it financially or scheduling, okay, one is better than none. But I look for that overnight and a dinner in the evening to get the teamwork approach as fiduciaries for the members. And it's been incredibly, not only insightful, but focusing for the board. Remarkable change.
Okay, thank you, Jerry. Sherry, I can't see if you have your hands raised. Do you want to add anything?
So the only thing I would add is I thought our last one that we had was great. I did enjoy that, and I did enjoy even the evening being able to, like even Richard said, be out of the work mode. But I do understand it is difficult to get out of the office sometimes. Is it possible that when you do the Google poll, you do them like in 2-day blocks, maybe? Like, say, can you make either one of these 2 days? And then that way, maybe you can check on the accommodations too, because I do think that cost is a factor. We do want to keep the cost down. And, I don't know how much we've actually, I think we've dedicated, some money to this in the past. But I just think maybe we need to right now just do them in 2-day blocks. And, when we're doing the Google poll, and then that way, I personally, depending on where you're going, and I know a lot of people come from the coast and all that, but, any people having to drive from the coast all in one day, I know that's a lot. And I know a lot of people do that, but I don't know how much work and how worn out you are, when you have to do that. So I'm open to anything. I think maybe we should just try to capture the options in the Google poll.
Thank you.
Okay, so Doris, it looks like you have probably good feedback, and so hopefully that helps for the survey. Okay, great. Now we're on to item number 8, which is the Mendocino County Retirement Association Board Work Plan.
Thank you, Chair Judy, members of the board. There is an update on the board work plan in your packets. One of the more significant items was we had postponed an upgrade to our pension system environment due to the work associated with the correction project. Simply due to security reasons, we've decided that can't be delayed any further, and we are starting that at the end of this month or early next month as far as upgrading our environments for the pension system. This does not actually change any functionality of the pension system. It's really just a behind the scenes upgrade of servers and applications that will improve the running and security. So that's marked on here as no longer being postponed, but being scheduled. We did hire a extra help person, Allison. She started essentially at the end of June. She's really only put in about 4 days or so right now, but we're working on getting a regular schedule with her and hope that she'll be able to help us maintain routine office work like the scanning of items to members' file and mail and things of that nature to allow staff to really focus on the other work that needs to be done. As mentioned, we did get confirmation from the IRS on acceptance and a compliance statement for our DCP plan. We are continuing with virtual new employee orientations per the county's direction there. We've recently had done the investment program portfolio structure review. Callan, I believe, still has another asset class or two to go on that, and that's coming forward. The board had mentioned, or at least some member of the board had mentioned, wanting some additional information on environmental, social governance, ESG investments. So we are looking at bringing forward an investment item on, or educational item on that in the future. And I think there was something in the packet regarding if the board would like to provide direction that they would like to receive that, we can get that scheduled. There were a couple of dates noted, I thought. We've been on top of reviewing our policies. There is an update on one of them in the administrative report that I'll get to later. If you have any questions regarding any of the status of items on the board work plan, I'll take your questions now. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions or comments for Doris? Vice Chair Smith?
You're muted.
The ESG was mentioned at one point, and I would vote for some mini session on that just to learn a little bit more about what options there are. But my other comment has not to do with the details on the work plan, but has to do with the format. And I'm just wanting to, I'm not married to this format. So if after we go through our next strategic planning process, if you have another plan format that you would like to use to communicate these items to the board, I would be open to seeing what that is. This has worked fine, but I know there's other options too.
Thank you.
And I would I agree with Vice Chair Smith and Jerry on this. I would like to learn more about ESG investments and options for the retirement system. Okay, do we have any members of the public wishing to comment on this item?
There is no public comment at this time.
Okay. Doris, do you feel you have feedback?
I think I'm okay on that one. We can move on.
Okay. All right. Next, we have the agenda item number 9 about resuming in-person board meetings, and we have a report from you on options.
Thank you, Chair Judy. As it stands currently, the extension of Governor Newsom's order allowing virtual attendance without opening up locations for public comment where each board member is located is set to expire at the end of September, which means unless something changes, the board will be back to providing in-person meetings starting in October. The Brown Act does allow Board of Trustees to attend remotely. However, if you attend remotely after that point, the location you are remoting in from does need to be open and available for public comment from that location. So with anticipation that we would be returning to in-person meetings in October, we started to look at options that would provide a larger boardroom to, again, provide for some social distancing and also provide an opportunity for public comment. Just because the board is returning to in-person meetings, that does not prohibit the public from attending virtually. And it would be our hope that we can continue to offer a Zoom and phone options for members to make public comment, especially for folks who aren't in the area where our public meetings are held, to give them another option, in addition to providing in-person public speaking at the meeting itself. So we are looking at some facilities. One of the largest problems with some facilities is the need for additional IS support for cameras, microphones, etc. We are looking at a number of county facilities that have a setup similar to this with cameras and mic already included that would minimize the assistance we would need from IT. Facilities under consideration include the new behavioral health training center out in Redwood Valley that is currently has some construction going on and scheduled to be completed in August. That location will also be used for the Board of Supervisors meetings, since the Board of Supervisors chambers will be undergoing renovation here in Ukiah. We've looked at the University of California Cooperative Extension Farm Advisor Conference Room, the Ukiah Conference Center, Admin Conference Centers B and C. We've had some facilities are better for allowing public access than others, especially since at this point we don't know how open the county will be as far as allowing public access due to the pandemic. Some facilities that we eliminated were the Veterans Hall because there's no Wi-Fi, and several other locations that indicated that they are remaining closed at this point in time, and they're not willing to talk to us about meeting yet as far as October. So if you have any preferences or suggestions, you can let us know at this point in time. But I would anticipate that you should plan on returning to an in-person meeting somewhere in October.
Thank you, Doris. And I think of the facilities under consideration, I think the first two, the Behavioral Health Training Center, Redwood Valley, and the UC conference room are the two largest spaces, and therefore I think probably the two preferred spaces. Vice Chair Smith, your audio.
I don't see our current conference room on your list. Is that not under consideration at all? And is that because of the size? I'm sorry, what?
This conference room is too small to allow for social distancing. And there still may be requirements for social distancing. Even
they are.
So
okay.
we'll try to, or we will comply with the Cal OSHA guidelines. And again, those change from time to time. Currently, vaccinated people do not need to wear masks indoors, and I don't think they said that social distancing is required. But since we would be opening up the facility for public comment, we wanted to have a slightly larger space, because by the time you get the full board in here and any members of the public, it is very full with this meeting room being so small.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Burke.
So you mentioned the Cal OSHA guidelines, and I haven't really talked about this, I don't think, with Doris, and I'm not sure how Mendocino County is handling it, but I know cities and counties are going through the process of figuring out how they're going to have their employees, and I assume that would apply to elected officials and trustees as well, to sign an attestation form or to provide documentation consistent with Cal OSHA, whether you've been vaccinated or not. And folks who are not vaccinated are required to wear masks indoors. And so I just throw that out for some discussion. And then, of course, you have issues with the public, and I don't know the public agencies are going to have the public sign attestation forms, or they're just going to have a sign that says, you know, you shall be masked if you're not vaccinated. And so there's a host of interesting questions that arise from that. And we have a little bit of time and we can see what the county's doing. And so I just throw those issues out, and you know, we don't have to get into in-depth discussions on them today, but there are issues that will need to be resolved.
Yeah, and I've not heard a definitive answer on that as to how the county is planning to address members of the public coming into board meetings, for example. But the board chambers are being remodeled in a way that the county employees and the board members will all be essentially on one half of the room, and members of the public with reduced seating, so there'll be fewer seats, will be in the other half of the room of the board chambers. So there is a remodel taking place, and that'll be the net effect. So fewer members of the public will have seats in the room, and we'll have overflow conference room for if people cannot be personally seated in the chambers. That kind of goes to why I was pointing to the Behavioral Health Training Center and the UC conference room being larger spaces. That you know, we don't have hundreds of people showing up to our board meetings, but still, I think I would think we'd want to select a larger conference room to allow for more social distancing, because I'm not clear how we really guarantee that everybody who shows up is vaccinated. And even with vaccination, it's like maybe 95% effective. There's still a chance that if we've been vaccinated, we could still get COVID from someone else. Judy?
Just in polling and looking for alternate locations, one thing that I'm being told is that the staff right now is envisioning a return to public meetings and requiring everyone to wear a mask. That alleviates having to have an attestation or, you know, singling anyone out for being vaccinated or not vaccinated.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Jerry.
I'd like to back what Kathy said about getting back here. I wouldn't mind, even though I'm vaccinated, having to wear a mask. And we've never really had many people come to our meetings at all. Maybe if we have something that looks like it's going to be really hot, we might consider having to go elsewhere. But I think the sooner we get back in here to our regular board meetings, and I don't mind showing proof of vaccination. And people who aren't vaccinated or can't show proof of vaccination, I'm talking about the public, still have the same option they have now of attending via Zoom. So the more we are able to interact as a board, and I think the most people I've ever seen in our audience would probably be counted on one hand, maybe two.
Okay.
So this is Sherry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I know I'm an outlier from everybody, even at the admin center. As someone who has been at work from day one wearing a mask for the last year and a half almost, I do not want to wear a mask, and if there's any way that we can avoid it, I would like to avoid it. And that's just my opinion, and I understand, and I have no problems if people wear masks, don't wear masks, whatever. But I think that there needs to be some benefit for getting the vaccination, and I am happy to prove that I have the vaccination. My entire office is vaccinated. We all went together to get the vaccination. And I think, as far as I'm concerned, it's time to move past this having to wear a mask, particularly when you are working every day.
I would state that my concern, if we returned here, and especially if board members were wearing masks, would be difficulty with the audio. We might have to look at even getting additional mics, regardless of the location, to ensure that we can pick up all the trustees or any public comment clearly.
So for clarification, my understanding is that if we had a large enough space, that those of us who had proof of vaccination would not necessarily, under the state protocols, need to be masked, that we could be unmasked because we've proven that we've been vaccinated. I think I understood it, that the comment was that members of the public, there's really not much opportunity to prove that they've been vaccinated or not, and so that they might be the ones wearing masks, or at least they're in a separate or at least a larger room and with some good air circulation and some distance from those of us that we all know were vaccinated. And so I think it's prudent to be in a larger room with good air circulation, nothing else.
I agree. There's really no air circulation in this room, especially once you shut the doors.
Okay, so anyway, so the search continues, but again, I would strongly suggest focusing on if we can secure either of those first two conference rooms. I think they should be large enough and they should have good air circulation.
Thank you. We'll give you an update at the coming meetings. And as noted today, we have kind of moved to hybrid meetings. So if someone does have technological or connectivity issues, we are open here for a couple of folks to allow for some social distancing, but we will be providing this space over the next couple of months until we return in full in-person meetings somewhere.
Okay, did we have any public comment on this item?
There is no public comment at this time.
Okay, thanks. Okay, well, we have item number 10, which is discussion possible action regarding retiree return to COVID covered employment policy.
Thank you, Chair Dirty, members of the board. This policy is up for its triennial renewal. There have been essentially no changes to this other than adding a sentence in paragraph D on page 4, and then, of course, updating the dates that it was reviewed and adopted by the board. The only comment in the margin is that we do have a section that talks about limits on covered employment and what happens if the limit is exceeded by a de minimis amount, but we do not define de minimis. And my note to myself was whether or not that was something we wanted to define or whether we wanted to leave it undefined so we had perhaps a little more flexibility in reviewing it to determine if it was de minimis or not. The way the policy is written, it would be a de minimis amount of hours over the 960 hour limit that a retiree could return to work for a plan sponsor, and not a dollar value per se. We don't have to take any action on the amount. That was just sort of my question and thoughts, and then whether or not there's any other changes as requested by the board to incorporate to adopt this for the next these changes.
Okay, Mr. Burke.
So if memory serves correctly, I think that the reason that we had de minimis in there is we may have had an issue at that time with somebody who was like an hour over. I'm just kind of having a vague memory of that. And that may be the reason why that's in there. And candidly, you know, I don't know that you can, you know, I don't know how strict it's really construed. So I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other, whether it's in or out or you define it or not. But I think that may be the history.
Okay, it doesn't need to be defined. The policy can continue using that phrase without definition. I don't have a problem with that.
Any questions or comments? Judy, do we have any public comments on this item?
There's no public comment on this item.
Okay. Doris, are you looking for a motion to approve the policy with modifications as presented?
Yes.
So moved.
Did you hear that, Jerry? Wanted to move for that.
Yes.
Seconded.
Okay. Okay. Seconded by Director Cromer. Can we have a roll call?
Ms. Shatmeyer,
Yes.
Mr. Jurdy,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Cromer,
Aye.
Mr. Shoemaker,
Aye.
Ms. Harris,
I,
approved.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks. So that takes us to, I think, just about the last item on the agenda, which is administration and operations update.
Thank you, Chair Jurdy, members of the board. First, I'd like to apologize for the grammatical error in the first paragraph. There is an update, as mentioned, regarding the active and deferred member to receive a contribution refund due to the Alameda decision. This included a dollar value for your reference that we're refunding contributions and interest of $197,000 roughly. We have completed reviews for members affected by the option 3-4 and anticipate sending notices to them later this month or early next month. The records retention policy is actually due for review. It was due, I believe, a couple of months ago. At the request of council, this item is being held so we can address questions relating to the use, storage, and destruction of electronic documents and requirements for electronic document management systems. And we'll be bringing this policy back for board review upon completion of the research relating to those retention and destruction requirements. As I mentioned, and earlier, there had been a request for ESG educational session before the board. Callan has offered to bring in one of their staff who specializes in that, and they have the following dates available: August 18th, October 20th, or November 3rd. And I'd like to get some input from the board and direction on which meeting you would like to have that scheduled at. That is something that we could consider adding to the offsite for the strategic plan if the timing works out with Callan also. And then also there were a couple of attachments from SACRS. One of them wanted suggestions regarding topics for upcoming webinars and conferences. That was put out by SACRS at the request of our own trustee, Catherine Cavanis, because they would like to ensure that the biannual or the semi-annual conferences address topics that trustees are interested in. So if you could please fill out that form and return it to us or to SACRS directly so they can have some feedback. We'd appreciate it. The deadline for that is August 30th. And then there's also a legislative update in the packet. If you have any questions, I'm happy to address any questions you have at this point. The only item I wanted direction on again is the scheduling of the ESG educational component.
Jerry?
Suggestion for the ESG of it being on our offsite. If the offsite is a day and a half, I would like to see ESG presented on the first day. If it's one day, I think we're going to be pressed enough to try to go over mission goals, everything else that we will be looking at. So I would say then I think it should be at one of the board meetings.
Okay.
Jerry, along those lines, I agree with you, and I think maybe it would be beneficial if we had the presentation at the August 18th meeting. That way it would be in advance of the offsite, and we might want to have a follow-up at the offsite, based on what we discussed and learned at the August 18th meeting.
I could agree with that one as well. I just don't want it part of a one-day meeting or offsite.
Okay.
Any questions or comments? Director Cromer?
I would agree with both of your comments that the earlier the better on the ESG, and I don't think there's been any discussion so far about our offsite meeting being any time in August, because I think it would probably be pressing the issue. So I would also agree that August 18th sounds great.
All right, we'll work on ensuring that that date's still available with Callan and hopefully get that scheduled for August. Hopefully there aren't any other issues. If there's any other board members who have a different preference, you can let me know, but it looks like a lot of people would like that August 18th date.
Okay, thanks. Did you have any other item on your report where you wanted feedback?
No, the other one was the SACRS survey, which can be returned to us. You don't need to give me feedback on that today at the meeting, the survey can be returned directly to SACRS. Again, the deadline for that is August 30th.
Okay, and we also have attached to your report is the legislative update from SACRS.
Yes, there is a legislative update from SACRS in your board materials. There wasn't anything regarding that I needed any direction on. It did mention an item on a couple of clarifying changes to the board position for disability retirements, an item regarding compensation earnable that's really coming forward out of the Ventura area that has to do with Alameda related items. Our fiduciary council has indicated that because our board has already taken action on Alameda items pursuant to the Supreme Court decision, that this would not affect us as written, and unless anybody has any questions regarding anything on the legislative slate, I don't need any feedback on that at this point.
Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised. Do we have any members of the public wishing to comment on this agenda item?
There's no public comment at this time.
Okay, all right, well, thank you. I guess that concludes that item. Do we have any general board member discussion?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Jerry.
I have a little one, but one that for me has been terribly relevant, and that is Jack Enos, who has come to address this board once or maybe twice. The CEO of CalSTRS both retired and turned 70 2 weeks ago, and his wife, who has been an absolute star in state health education in the hospitals, managed to pull off a total surprise party for Jack at the next door neighbor's house. And I was one of two board members invited to attend. And to see the people there who are and have been the bureaucrats that run what I consider to be an absolutely stellar organization in CalSTRS, and their affection and respect for Jack was so gratifying, and for me to be able to be there with a lot of people who've become friends and who were colleagues that are now friends. Jack was, it's hard to say that, was an amazing leader for the largest educator pension fund in the world. And the recruitment for the new CEO for again, Cassandra will be, I'm quite sure, as great a leader as Jack has been. But it was an honor for me to be invited by Jack's wife. It was a great time. Party was next door. Jack had been complaining about the fact that he knew he was going to dinner over there, that the neighbor's music was too loud. And was absolutely floored to see about 70 people, those who he worked with those years. So bureaucracies can function well and can be leaders in global finance. So the personal privilege to talk about that get together.
Okay, Jerry. Well, we appreciate the perspective you bring, having been served on that board.
It was my honor to serve on that board, and he'll leave it.
Okay, do we have any other board member items? Director Comer?
Just a quick note, I think there's a misprint on our agenda item today for the next meeting. It's listed as August 21st. And just to note for all trustees and the public, it's actually the 18th, I believe.
Thank you, Quincy.
Thank you. That's noted. I'll take care of that.
Okay. If there are no other comments on the agenda, then I think we are adjourned.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Okay.